Hey, listeners. So we're back again. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. I am Mambo Buck, and today I am here with Mambo Muni from Keep the Clarity. Don't forget to like, follow on Instagram and Facebook. And so I know in our on earlier podcast we were talking about kind of some of the limitations to Western medicine. And I know that you also kind of when one of our first podcasts, I think you were talking about, your background's actually in psychotherapy. And so I think it would be really neat to understand what your views are on the limitations of that, where your journey has taken you, how you see that impacting people's lives, like our listeners, your clients that have come to you, and really talking to us about the impact and the journey there. I can say from my own side, I I think that there are therapists out there that are definitely trying to help. I do think that there's a significant limitation to how much they can help because it's so focused just on the mind and thinking all root causes come just from the mind. And if they do, not really thinking about how else that might be impacting any given person's actual experiences, right? Like, I'm depressed all the time. Well, there's no chemical imbalance. So why am I so depressed? Or I have tons of anxiety. You can give me medication for that. You've diagnosed me with anxiety, but why do I have so much anxiety? How do I resolve that truly without staying in, say, maybe psychotherapy forever? Like, how do I resolve this for real?
Mhm.
So that's something that I've always thought about because I often said I would be a terrible therapist because my goal is to get you off the couch. I don't want you on. I want you living your best life. Like, let's get it fixed. Out you go, which is not a great customer model, I guess, if you want
Mhm.
continuous clientele. So it was definitely not the right profession for me, although both you and I totally deal with people all day, every day.
Mhm.
And we do have to hear about what's going on with them. So I'd love to hear how that's translated from you and your journey from really being focused on psychotherapy to where you are today as a mambo, a spiritual healer and worker, and how, if in any way, that's been incorporated.
What I want to framework this by, with is the limitations of Western psychotherapy. And I already know for a lot of people, this might feel like a provocative topic, or it might bring up some resistance or disbelief, which all we welcome it all. And it all serves a reason, a purpose, right? Because there are a lot of people I work with that are training to be psychotherapists, a lot of clients, a lot of people who already are psychotherapists. I myself actually still work in both worlds, meaning I work as a mambo, doing call it holistic shamanic healing, and then I still work as a psychotherapist, actually with like billing insurance companies, so people have access to a certain realm. That's actually one of my root reasons why I continue to work in that space is it's what people have more access to. And that can literally boil down to financial access, right? Our insurance companies, most people maybe work jobs that give them insurance or have a spouse or a partner, right? And so they have access. And so it feels good for me to be able to serve people who have that kind of,
Mhm.
hey, this is what I have access to financially, right?
Yeah.
Now, that speaks to something bigger though, right? And I remember having a conversation with Papa Hector once, and I couldn't agree with this more and even more and more and more as I practice, which is science. Western science is slow to catching up on everything.
Yeah.
Slow. And what's funny is there's a bit of a paradox in it too. That Western medicine is slow to catching up to things that have existed for eons. So it's like we're looking at things as like progressing. How do we progress in the realm of psychotherapy?
Mhm.
And you'll see that people nowadays in the field and clients outside of the field are realizing more and more and more that just talking about our problems, which was the original way traditional Western psychotherapy was designed, was talk, listening, the healing power of having some unconditional, non-judgmental listener. People are realizing more and more that that doesn't actually move things beyond the mind. And as you know deeply, mom of the mind, right? Mental changes are just one little notch of this like deep thread. Why do we all know, right, by the time we're adults, that most of the things that cause us issues, whether it's the behaviors that we engage in that we know cause imbalances for us, choices we make in our external lives, whatever it is, why do most of us know when we first enter the journey of healing that it's become automatic? We
Mhm.
already have a sense of like, I can't talk myself out of this verbally.
Yeah, yeah,
Because if I could have talked my way out of this, I'd done talked my way out of it 10 years ago.
yeah.
There's something deeper. There's
Hmm.
something that's hit the level of my cells, that's hit maybe the level of the unconscious, maybe the wiring of my nervous system, maybe something karmic.
Hmm.
So most of us have a sense of like there's something deeper than essentially what Western psychotherapy was designed to do and how Western
Hmm.
psychotherapists are trained that that it can't access. Why am I continuing to feel physiological anxiety 24/7, but I'm talking every week? I talk to my therapist once a week. I feel good after the session's done, right? I feel good. I
Hmm.
feel a sense of release, but then my issues still continue.
Yeah.
And so people are noticing this more and more that like, therapy is not just like a let me go once a week and like, just fart out my problems. And then like I leave my noxious gas in a space and it disappears.
So I think you're talking about kind of like immediate release or immediate purge versus
Mhm.
long-lasting clearing.
Exactly. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Cellular level, nervous system level. It can't happen via talk alone. So what you see, right, more and more now, when I go back to saying like people are noticing this, that includes clinicians. Like
Mm.
well-trained psychotherapists are going out and getting further skills training in things like EMDR, EFT, somatic psychology, right? There's all these branches starting to develop more and more and people leaning towards them because they're noticing that there is more to access beyond words alone, right? So there's some gaps here. But every single one of these things, right, going back to how slow science is, all of these methods that people are discovering more and more that, hey, there's something to be said about this EMDR. There's something to be said about this, right? Somatic level of work, energetic work, right? Which may, depending on practitioner skills, training may or may not be effective, obviously, right? But there's something people are picking up on. And then by the time science has to catch up to it, 2 decades before someone creates a modality, then creates a way to train other people in it that's accredited, that then can provide enough evidence, right? And there's money along
Hmm.
all of these steps. So the issues of Western psychology by the masses also then boil down to like so many things, issues of privilege, issues of who had the money to put in the thing that then gets recognized as a way of helping and healing,
It's like
right?
accessibility.
Accessibility, right? And
Hmm.
there's no surprise that I went to a graduate school that claimed to be focused on diversity and spirituality and be very innovative, and it tried its best, okay, to do that as an accredited university. All right. But essentially, they can only touch on so much ethically.
Yeah.
They're only allowed to touch on so much. And it's no surprise that even in a school like that, what were we being taught? Basic listening skills, right? Maybe something fun like dream work was like an elective,
Mhm.
right? And I'm giving you this example of what we're taught because this is when you go and you find a Western psychologist, this is what I'm talking about. They had to go to school to become that. They were fed certain information, training, things like that to become that. And so we're sitting in classes, right? And why is it that all of the assessment skills we're learning were developed by a bunch of predominantly white male scholars who are coming up with the recipe for how do we claim that someone is depressed? How do we say that someone is psychotic? Things like that. And so, what you're being fed is a very specific funnel that has had a certain level of privilege and power system. And that to me is one of the biggest forces of like the limitations of Western psychology. I was trained as a psychotherapist, and I mentioned some of the reasons why I still practice in that realm. There is a lot of middle space that I can tap into with what I do as like a healer in this realm and a therapist in this realm, right? So there's a lot of these limitations that I could ethically transcend to a certain degree, right? So I can, for example, guide people through meditations that I'm trained in as a Mambo.
Yep.
That are very kind of rooted in energetic science, natural science, we'll call it. So there's a lot that I can bring in. But then there's a level, right, of work and healing that I cannot bring in ethically.
Yeah.
As a therapist, right? That therapists cannot ethically bring in, right? You're signing off when you do work as a licensed professional counselor, for example, on what you're able to provide, right? I'll give you an example of many clients I've encountered, clients who have severe depression and suicidal thoughts that get very intensive, right? And actually, what they're dealing with alongside the internal issues that therapy is going to look at. There could be some physiological elements that, after a certain period of their nervous system being damaged by trauma, physiologically, they need some boost in minerals and all this kind of stuff. This is one out of infinite examples. And then what I've seen multiple times, right, is someone has a spirit of an ancestor or someone's past presence in a home that had committed suicide. And that spirit is actually the thing that is causing an extremely high level of that invasive suicidal thinking, is another being. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
And I remember in one of Papa Hector's podcasts, I think Mama Toya, right, our godmother in our temple, she said something so powerful. She said that at a certain point, it's literally unethical. And I hold that firmly as someone who can wear both hats, psychotherapist, spiritual healer, right? And this is going to sound crazy to some people, but because I am a Mambo and I have developed a certain level of skill set as a shamanic practitioner, right? Someone who works with the spirits directly, things like that. If I'm sitting now in a psychotherapy session, billing somebody for week after week after week after week of depression, but I have a sense that something spiritual is going on, and it becomes unethical at a certain point in my clarity to not be like, hey, there might be something else you're dealing with.
Right.
To give you the proper treatment. What if this person's, and I have seen this and actually performed it as well, what if somebody's depression drops 40% and the suicidal thinking totally stops with, in my example, a spirit removal, right? So really, right, what it goes back to, and you see like what I'm saying of like, it's going to take some time, let's be real, for a day when all the psychotherapists that are being accredited and trained in these universities are then in their curriculum in their colleges and universities that by nature are very culturally biased, right? That they're going to add some classwork about the importance of referring a client out to a spiritual healer. And then being able to access spiritual healers or similar practitioners who are clear in what they do with all of these traditions that have become lost and watered down because of colonization, right? So, when I talk about the limitations, right, what I really want to emphasize, right, is that the limitations are vast and strong and have come through very systemically in such a way where I don't want to have this conversation and devalue the world of psychology. In the Western world, it's here in this Western plane, it's their next step of a treatment that was once stigmatized. At least it's that. At least we're talking about mental health. At least
Yeah.
we're talking about addiction as an illness instead of, people with addictions are bad people, gross people, right? At least the realm of psychology is opening up something, you know,
Mhm.
on this plane. And if someone is seeing a therapist, psychologist, psychotherapist, or training to become one, I wouldn't want to discourage it because it is an avenue in to
Yeah.
supporting people that's realistic on this plane. But what I would love to see is that more and more clinicians and clients are learning about other traditions with an open heart and an open mind and being open to, hey, like, can I pick up on when I need to stay in my lane? Can I pick up on when I'm outside of my lane? Can I go and get a training on my own, even if my college or university didn't do it? Give it
Yeah.
to me. Can I take that additional step? So that's the movement I would like to see in the world of healers. Um, when
Hmm.
I was getting psychotherapy back in the day, even though I knew intuitively there were limitations in it, there
Yeah.
was something that a slightly spiritual minded therapist was able to kind of open for me. So, we make use of what we have. And at the same time, I know you and I both back talked about, sometimes people come to us as a last resort, I
Hmm.
think that's what I would leave us off on, in terms of these limitations and how to deal with them is like, again, going right back to one of our other podcasts. If you, as your self advocate, know that there's something beyond what you're getting,
Yeah.
but maybe there's something else you're not getting, or maybe you're someone who's training to be a psychotherapist, but you have other gifts, right? Then that's where it might be good to get some other consultation. We're both here, our spiritual services keep the clarity, right, to give consultations around things like this that kind of fall out of the scope, and have a lot of practices and things like that that have been beautifully healing people for thousands and thousands of years. So I talk about limitations with an open heart, you know and that they're real and they run deep.
Absolutely. This has been A, very informative, and B, very inspirational about kind of how you've been able to allow kind of two different hats of practice to embolden each other and kind of fill that space of gap or have one that's able to assist in a deeper identification, right? This might not be that right approach. This is going to be one that we want to explore for a deeper impact. I think there was something you said in the beginning about kind of just how all of this came about and the privilege that's involved in the not just the privilege but the perspective that's involved.
Mhm.
And the way that I was digesting this is almost, so there was a very kind of narrow set group of individuals who created all of this, but it can only be from that one perspective, right? But it's been applied as a not uniform and universal kind of application. And so I
Mhm.
think one of the gaps I'm seeing based on just all that you just said and the knowledge you've just shared is there's so many other indicator and influences. Like it might be, you might have a chemical imbalance, you might have a this, you might have a that, but you also might have a cultural influence or a ancestral influence or some
Mhm.
other sort of influence that's worsening these symptoms or compounding these symptoms that psychotherapy alone cannot resolve based on its literal limitations because it
Mhm.
doesn't contemplate this whole spectrum of what could be impacting what's being seen, like by
Mhm.
the eye or spoken by the tongue.
Yes.
So I think
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big nugget to chew on. I will say that, not in a bad way. This has been magnificent. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and about how you're kind of almost like walking in two worlds, one foot on one side, one foot on the other, and really helping like optimize how you're able to support. So I think that's amazing.
Mhm.
And it allows avenues because we're talking about accessibility, right, for everyone really, based on
Yeah.
what can they get, what can they access, and where can that journey take them deeper and deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope
Thank you.
listeners, you got a whole lot out of Mambo Muni's session today because I know I did. And don't forget to like, subscribe on all your favorite listening channels. And don't forget, we burn brighter together. So until next time, stay lit.
Stay lit.